Hi everyone, my name's Jenny and I am back today with another video. Today I'm going to be doing a Friday Reads video, which is the first time I've done one of these, which is for two reasons. The first of which is I was working on a vlog last weekend and I decided to scrap the vlog because there were parts of it that I didn't particularly like, including a book of the month unboxing, which I no longer want to publicly support book of the month on this channel. In addition, I also had a lot of me processing my thoughts on the protests and police brutality and systems of oppression here in America, which while it was really helpful for me to process those thoughts, I don't know if it's a productive enough dialogue to actually post publicly on my channel. So I've decided to scrap that vlog, but I did want to talk about the books that I talked about in that vlog somewhere, especially because I found it really helpful last month to have a place where my thoughts on the books I read at the beginning of the month were fresher in my mind than they will be at the end of the month. Additionally, I also just wanted to try out this format. I have several people that I really like watching their content who do Friday reads as opposed to a month-long wrap-up. My reading varies quite a bit week by week. Sometimes I read a lot in a week, and then other times I'm working on several books and I don't finish any of them over the course of the week, so I'm not sure if this will be a long-term solution, but I thought I would try it out today. So getting into the three books that I finished this week and a fourth one that I DNF'd, as well as the ones that I'm currently reading. We'll just start with the DNF because that's the first one that I gave up on, which was Grown Ups by Marian Keyes. I was reading this as an e-arc from NetGalley, so thank you so much to Doubleday, the publisher here in the US and Canada, as well as NetGalley for providing me with this copy. And I gave up on this one about 30% of the way through, which, given that it's 650 pages, was about 200 pages into this one. So I got pretty far along, and I just felt that I kind of got the gist of everything that was going to happen and the discussions that Marian Keyes wanted to have within the novel, so I didn't feel like I was going to gain a whole lot more by reading the rest, so I decided just to give up on this one. I would recommend it if women's fiction, family sagas or something you're into. It's just, it was so long and it was just not really the vibe that I was looking for at that time. Additionally, the e-arc was just terribly formatted, so it was really hard to read physically. So I just gave up on that one. I might return to it at some point if that's really what I'm looking for, but it just really wasn't working with the mood that I was in last weekend, as well as just the kind of general vibe that I look for in that family saga women's fiction type genre. So that was that one. The next book that I read and finished during the weekend was You Never Forget Your First, a biography of George Washington by Alexis, and I thought this one was absolutely phenomenal. I would highly recommend it. I give it 4 stars, and I will say you do have to have some interest of George Washington or the early foundations of America in terms of the American Revolution and the creation of the Constitution. If you don't have any interest whatsoever in that time period in American history, this is obviously not going to be an interesting book for you because that is its primary goal and focus. And early American history is not a period of history that I'm particularly interested in. I am more interested in kind of the Civil War era and then other periods kind of in world history, just because it is quite an emphasized time during K through 12 public history education here in America. So I feel like I kind of got the gist back then, but Alexis did a great job at kind of supplementing that and creating a more nuanced discussion. So in this, Alexis is writing a biography of George Washington that is kind of a pushback against a lot of the very hyper-masculine ideas that get pushed forward through a lot of his other, behemoth biographies that are kind of the common tropes of presidential biographies. These 800-page documenting every moment, hyper-masculinizing George Washington, describing him as this kind of mythological being within American culture and ideology. And I think Alexis does a phenomenal job of bringing George Washington back to earth and kind of complexifying him in terms of his viewpoints and the viewpoints he brought to the creation of America. So in this, Alexis really focuses on George Washington's ownership of slaves. He owned about 300 slaves that worked for him in Mount Vernon. He had a personal assistant whose name was Billy Lee, who was his enslaved assistant from before the American Revolution, and then he was injured during the Revolution, and then he was discharged from service after the Revolution after requesting that his wife join the Washingtons in New York, and that request was denied, and then Billy Lee kind of disappeared from the records shortly after that. Alexis also talks about an additional particular slave that the Washingtons had, whose name was Hercules, and he, among several other personal servant slaves, were brought to Philadelphia periodically after the American Revolution during the kind of time of the creation of the Constitution to assist the Washingtons in their kind of daily activities. However, given that the capital at that time was in Philadelphia, and Philadelphia was a city in which an enslaved person who lived there for 6 months would be declared a free person and was emancipated from slavery, the Washingtons actually would periodically send back their slaves to Mount Vernon about every 6 months to ensure that they could continue to keep them as slaves even though they were living in Philadelphia. So Alexis Coate is not afraid to point out all of those aspects of George Washington and his ownership of slaves and his thoughts on slavery, which I think was such an important dialogue to be having at this time because of kind of remembering that slavery is something that was embedded into the American Constitution, American ideologies. Like, the foundation of America is slavery, and would highly recommend this one if kind of exploring how slavery was embedded in the thoughts of the creators of the Constitution and the early American government is something that interests you. Okay, and then the next book that I finished during that reading vlog was The Margot Affair by Sinai Lemon. This is a debut novel out the 16th of June, so it's coming out next Tuesday. That is published by Hogarth, so thank you to Hogarth as well as NetGalley for providing me with this e-arc. And this one I gave like 3.5 stars. I think it's a strong debut, but it is not going to be like a new all-time favorite. Although I am interested in seeing what Lemon puts out next because I really liked her writing style. So The Margot Affair follows Margot, who is 16 or 17 at the start of the novel, who is the daughter of a famous French actress and a French politician. And she's the, like, secret love child of this decades-long affair that these two people had. So the politician is married publicly to another woman, he has 2 sons with that other woman, and he periodically visits Margot and her mother, Anouk, I think is how you'd say her name. French is not my strong suit. And eventually some things come to light in terms of Margot's parentage publicly, and things kind of ensue from there throughout the rest of the novel. And I really loved Lemon's descriptions of France and the culture. It was an incredibly atmospheric read, which feels kind of a weird word to describe because I feel like that's often used in terms of like fantasy, but it really felt like you were in France, like eating croissants and like walking through the streets of Paris, which I really enjoyed. I think that is of something I really look for in novels, and I think Lemon has a really strong ability to craft a sense of place within the novel. However, I just didn't really love any of the characters. I think this is a classic, it's both a coming of age story for Margot, but also a classic like people behaving badly trope, which if it's done well, I like reading about people who are doing things I don't agree with, but with this, I just didn't really feel connected to any of the characters, particularly Margot, who is our titular character, and who, to me, kind of seemed you were supposed to like. I just didn't really like her. She felt a bit too naive for being 16, 17, and having these, like, 2 parents. I feel like there were a lot of things that she did that I was like, Margot, that was, like, kind of really stupid. Additionally, because it's from Margot's perspective, the other characters felt very flat sometimes, and I think that's in part intentional on Lemon's part in creating these characters that are so warped by Margot's kind of understandings of the world that she doesn't actually see these characters for who they really are. So I do appreciate that element of it, that sometimes the characters didn't make sense, but I think they also didn't make sense to Margot, so that was like effective on Lemon's part. Yeah, but I just didn't care for Margot all that much as a main character, and since it's really her story, that kind of dragged my rating down a little bit. But as I said, I definitely would read Lemon in the future. I just, like, this debut was not like everything for me. I will say, so Victor Laval, who I read The Changeling, actually I have all my books right here now. I reorganized my bookshelves. Oh, it's down here. I read The Changeling back in like December of 2018, I think, and Victor Laval is quoted on, he's like the pull quote on the front of the cover for The Margot Affair, and I really can see similarities between the writing styles, is that The Margot Affair had some kind of mysterious elements to it, which Victor Laval also writes like very literary, like mystery, almost borderline horror novels. So if you like Victor Laval, I feel like you might like Sinai Lemon. Additionally, this novel also reminded me quite a bit of Midori Vijay's The Far Field, which I read last year and really enjoyed, as well as the kind of coming-of-age characters that aren't super likable element to Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney. So if you like any of those novels, I would definitely recommend checking The Margot Affair out. I just didn't particularly absolutely love this one, but it was fine. And then the 4th book that I finished this week was The Dragonfly Sea by Yvonne Adiyambo Aurora. However, I'm talking about this one for my African Women Writers Project. That video should be coming out sometime early next week, so keep an eye out for that, but I'm not going to talk about my thoughts here on this one. And then I'm currently reading 5 books, one of which I can't talk to you about, which is for the BookTube Prize, which is 10 minutes, 38 seconds in This Strange World by Elif Shafak. So I'm reading about that one. I'm about 30% of the way through. Additionally, I also started, during that vlog, The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin, which I'm also 30% of the way through and absolutely loving. So I read and loved the 5th season Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin a couple years ago now. I think N.K. Jemisin is a phenomenal science fiction fantasy writer, and The City We Became is probably going to be a new favorite of mine. It is just so good. So this one follows 6 people in New York City who are slowly becoming an embodiment of the borough of which they are designated, if that makes sense. So in this world, every city has a soul or a spirit, and New York City, given its 5 boroughs, has 5. Actually, I think there's 6, because I think there's one that is like the embodiment of New York City as a whole. And so as New York City is kind of awakening into becoming a like sentient being on its own within this world, these 5 people are awakening with it in terms of gathering this kind of collective consciousness of their borough and its history. So this one is absolutely phenomenal. As I said, I'm about 30% of the way through. Really enjoying it so far. I think its discussions in terms of its themes of cities and the downfalls of cities, and those downfalls being white supremacy and capitalism and the lack of diversity and police brutality, all of those things are like very blatantly stated as what is kind of wrong with cities and what can make cities terrible places as opposed to like the diverse, wonderful places that they have the potential to be. So both as someone who's like very interested in cities as well as someone who really likes N.K. Jemisin, this is like truly the perfect book. So if you have access to this book and you are interested in like cities and discussions of cities, particularly through a like fantasy lens, I cannot recommend The City We Became enough. And I will definitely be talking about this one more in either my May wrap-up or a future Friday Reads video once I finish it. And then I'm also reading 3 physical books, or 3 physical books, but one of them I'm listening to on audiobook. The first of which is Emma Straub's All Adults Here. I read and loved Emma Straub's Modern Lovers now like 4 or 5 years ago, and this one I'm about 75 pages into, and it's fine so far. It's nothing really like that groundbreaking. I did pick it up intentionally because I was just looking for a book one night when I was having trouble like falling asleep that would just like totally turn my brain off, and this one is definitely doing that. It's very lighthearted and just kind of classic like women's contemporary fiction, which is what Emma Straub writes with kind of added heart, I guess you would say. And this one is fine. I don't know, I think there's a few moments in terms of like social commentary stuff that I'm like, that's like a little not with it anymore, if that makes sense. But this one follows the story of Astrid, who is a mother to 3 grown-up children, all of whom are in their like late 20s, 30s, who's kind of realizing that they all have some like growing up to do. So similar to Grown Ups, but kind of a different take on that story. And I am enjoying this one. I mean, I don't know if it'll be a new favorite like I thought it was going to be, but I will continue to read it. Additionally, I also just started last night Perennials by Mandy Berman. This one I talked about in my Try a Chapter video, which I will put a link to up in the cards above, and I only read the first chapter, so I've read about like 20 pages, and this one's fine so far. The writing is a little simplistic, so we'll see if that bothers me, but yeah, I don't really have any other thoughts about this one, but it is one that I will continue to be reading. And then the last one that I picked up on audio is one that I started reading about a year ago and read for about 3 months, got about halfway through, and then just put it on pause because I was not enjoying it that much, and that is The Gulf, The Making of an American Sea by Jack E. Davis. Davis is an academic at the University of Florida. Yeah, at the University of Florida in environmental history and sustainability, and I was particularly excited about this one. I love environmental history. I took some classes in environmental history, and one of my like main advisors during my undergrad was an environmental historian, and so I was really excited about this one because I think the Gulf of Mexico is a really fascinating place, sociologically, ecologically, geographically, geologically, you know, all of those logicallys. that I was really fascinated to kind of learn more about the history of it. However, this one, and I remembered my gripes with it that I had about a year ago as soon as I started re-listening to the audiobook of this one, which is that Jack E. Davis just doesn't have good thesis statements in any of his chapters. So they all, right now I'm on part 3, which is about kind of the advent of offshore oil drilling in the Gulf of Mexico, which is something I'm very fascinated with, and that's kind of why I wanted to pick this book back up, because I knew I was about to get into that section and I really wanted to learn more about the offshore oil drilling that's happening in the Gulf of Mexico. However, each chapter, while it says like, you know, the next chapter I'm on, for example, is oil and the Texas toe dip, that is not at all really related to the thesis of the chapter, nor do the chapters really even have a thesis. I think Jackie Davis is both trying to section his chapters thematically as well as chronologically, and he's just not doing a very good job, because the chronology element of it just means that he's constantly reincorporating like both pieces of kind of ecological change, cultural change, and then like kind of environmental interactions, such as like the boom of fishing or oil, all in the same chapter, and it just doesn't work very cohesively. So I am frustrated with this one, especially because I read The Heartbeat of Wounded Knee a couple months back. I talked about this one in my April wrap-up, and this one is so clearly, like, each chapter is so clearly defined. Like, you can go into each chapter and know exactly what is going to like be discussed in that chapter, as I think any historical text in general, but especially for like a public audience, should really be, because a thesis statement is really important in history, because you can just get so bogged down in the weeds. And I just feel like Jackie Davis is like doing that. He's just getting into the weeds and he forgets to pull himself back. So I really wish this had kind of had a better editor who went back to like the basics of like, you need to have an introductory paragraph to every chapter saying, this is what this chapter is about, this is the thesis of this chapter, this is how it relates to the broader thesis of the book, because he just like doesn't do that, and it's very frustrating to read. So there's that one. I am going to continue plodding along in it because I do want to learn more of that like oil history, but I'm not sure I'm particularly enjoying it. So those are all the books that I have read in the past week / currently reading. I'm going to end this Friday Reads with some of the lighter B-roll clips from that scrapped vlog, including a little garden update, as well as some final footage of a raspberry jam peach galette that I made. I'll put the recipe down in the description box below in case you want to attempt it for yourself. So that is everything. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great weekend if you're watching this today on Friday, and I will talk to you next time. Bye. Okay, so here is the plant area. Don't mind the like garbage and stuff over there. So we'll just start over here. So this is bee feed, and all of these I actually planted during my springathon vlog for the most part. I will point out a couple notable exceptions. And they are all doing like surprisingly well. It rained this morning, which was I think really nice for them. So this is a bee feed mix. It is some echinaceas, black-eyed Susans. I can't really remember what is in here, but it's like a large variety of flowering plants that attract bees. These ones are beets. They're kind of falling over a little bit. I am going to Home Depot tomorrow to get more soil, and I will help support these ones for sure. And then the cucumber's doing great. It's all by itself, but I think that actually will help it in the long run, and it's really been loving how much rain we've been getting. The peppers are also doing well. They're kind of small, and there's a lot of them, so I might have to get rid of some of them, unfortunately. And then this one I did already have previously, or actually it was gifted to me from someone else who does gardening, and this is a mint plant, so not much of this is like my doing, but I did put it in this cute little orange pot. And then here are the tomatoes. These ones are also getting a little scraggly and spindly, so I might kind of seed some of those out as well. And this is 3 different varieties of tomatoes, but I can't remember where I put them, so it'll be a mystery. Hopefully they will seed some flowers, or some fruits rather. And then these ones I actually just put in this pot. My cat just came outside too. There he is. Morris! Then we have these ones just got transplanted recently, and they are yellow squash. They are doing quite well. Very excited to see them continue to thrive in this larger pot. Then we also have watermelons, which are also doing well. Not much to say about them, really. This one is small looking, but it's doing well. And then we have sunflowers, and these ones need to be transplanted soon to a bigger pot, which I do have some bigger pots available, and they're also just getting kind of spindly, so that's fun. And then I do have some like extra peppers, but those ones I've not been caring for as well. So those are all the plants. You can look at them. They're all doing quite well, and I'm excited to see them continue to grow.